Coming up next on Kids TV and Me, author, illustrator, and children's television enthusiast Joshua Stauffer will be talking to you today about this.
Hi, AJ. Ready to go? Let's do it.
As we rode up the elevator to the statue's base, I could see that the repair work was well underway. I was truly amazed at the complicated web of pipes called scaffolding that surrounded Liberty. The scaffolding made it easy for the crew to reach any spot to be fixed.
Wow, those are the biggest toes I've ever seen. Is it okay if I touch them?
Well, sure, go ahead.
I couldn't believe I was standing close enough to actually touch Liberty's feet. And AJ showed me something very symbolic about the statue.
Over here, the broken chains that represent freedom in the new land.
What's going on up at the top?
Further up on the statue, there's a great deal of damage. Rust spots and skin damage. Let's go up and investigate.
This scaffolding is so huge. But is it safe?
Yeah, it sways a little, but it's safe.
This is quite a view, AJ.
Hello, everybody. Joshua Stauffer here, back with another episode of Kids TV and Me, and I've got a good one for you this week. I don't know if it'll beat last week's Harriet analysis, but it'll still be a lot of fun. Today we're going to be talking about another classic episode of Reading Rainbow, the 1986 episode, Watch the Stars Come Out. Actually, it was filmed in 85 and it aired in 86. And my mom recorded it for me in 2001, back when I was 3 years old. Now, before we dive into today's episode, there's a few quick little things I want to mention about the one we did last month, which was when Aunt Lena did the rumba. I was just thinking of that part in the book where Aunt Lena slipped on the cooked cabbage and landed thump right on her big rump. Then she said, Oh, I can't get up. Help me, please, she wailed. I think that was the first time I ever heard the term wailed. I mean, I knew that a whale was like a big fish or a big marine mammal, but that's W-H-A-L-E. I didn't know that W-A-I-L meant to, like, shout. Funny, they also use that word in Frog and Toad, not in the Apple TV show, but in the original book when they did the Lost Button story, when the raccoon gave Toad the square button, Toad wailed, "That is not my button. That button is square. My button was round." And it also never occurred to me that on Blue's Clues, when they did the male song, they said the word whale every single time, but that part never clicked. I just assumed, it's part of the song. Here's the male, it never fails. It makes me want to wag my tail. When it comes, I want to wail male. But yeah, that's another example of W-A-I-L, as opposed to W-H-A-L-E, like the ocean creature. So yeah, I forgot to mention that last month. Now, that infamous scene with Pierre Petofsky, the comedian, was filmed at that comedy club, which I believe is called the L.A. Cabaret or something. I was really impressed by the aesthetic of that comedy club. Like, it looked very 80s, the colors, the background design. And there were these pictures of palm trees, and there was a flamingo on the wall as well. That flamingo made me think of Isaac's Restaurant and Deli that we have here in Lancaster. Yeah, back when I was a kid, it used to have like kind of a tropical Miami Vice theme to it. And all their sandwiches were named after birds, and on the logo they used to have a pink flamingo. And when I saw that in this comedy scene on Reading Rainbow, it made me think of that, even though I usually only saw it in fast forward. My mom didn't think that kind of slapstick stuff was suitable for me at the age of 3, so I didn't get to see that until I was much older. And one more thing, in the Cats segment, that part where all the actors were getting dressed and putting on their makeup and they played that music in the background, that was actually a real song from the Cats musical. What was it called again? The Something Ball. How do you pronounce that? Jellicle? Is that like jelly something, like Jellicol? The Jellicol ball? Jellicle ball? Yeah, I think it's Jellicle. Jellicle ball, Jellicle cats. Whatever that means. The reason I know that now is because when I posted that podcast episode on YouTube, it gave me a little copyright notice saying that particular song was in it. It wasn't a copyright strike. YouTube was okay with me using it, but it let me know that song was in there. And I looked it up and played it and was like, oh yeah, that's what that is. In fact, we actually hear the words to that song at the beginning of that segment. That wasn't in the Duncan and Dolores version, but when Aunt Lena did the rumba, the cat segment begins with the song, the Jellicle songs for Jellicle cats, Jellicle songs for Jellicle cats. When I was little, I always thought they were singing Calico Cats, because in another episode of Reading Rainbow Pet Stories You Don't Have to Walk, they interviewed a lady who had a calico cat, and I thought that's what they were singing. But no, it's not calico, it's Jellicle Cats. Same number of syllables, though. So yeah, that pretty much covers it for the stuff that I forgot to talk about when we did When Aunt Lena Did the Rumba. So without further ado, let's take a look at today's episode of Reading Rainbow, Watch the Stars Come Out. Here we go. Alright, the episode begins with the classic typeface version of the words hosted by LeVar Burton. And we see lots of water in the background and some boats. Looks like there's a bridge there too. And looks like LeVar's on a boat too. He's climbing down off of something. And he says, hi there. This is another episode where he says hi there instead of just hi. It's definitely an 80s episode. He says, welcome to New York Harbor, port of entry into America for millions of aliens. And then he chuckles and says, no, I don't mean creatures from outer space, but foreigners, immigrants from another land who chose to come here. And right away, I just want to point out the fact that LeVar looks very different in this episode than he did in The Milkmakers. Even though both episodes came out the same year, this one was filmed a year earlier. LeVar's hair is shorter, and he has a mustache. When I was little, I used to think that this was a totally different guy than the LeVar that we saw in the late 90s and early 2000s, because 1985 LeVar looks extremely different from 2001 LeVar. And his voice is a little bit different too. In fact, when I was watching Blue's Clues when I was little, I thought 96 Steve was a different guy than 2000 Steve, because not only did he have a different hairstyle, but he had his voice changed as the seasons went by. But nope, this is the same LeVar Burton, just much younger. Yeah, he's definitely on a boat there, because when the camera is done zooming out and it stays still, obviously we see the camera on a tripod, and then like the background, the clouds behind him and behind the edge of the boats are kind of moving up and down, which means the boats that the camera is on is moving up and down the water. So that's definitely a boat. I wasn't sure what that was at first. And the next thing we see is a little aerial view of Ellis Island. LeVar says that that's where immigrants used to come to when they first arrived in America. He says that it's closed now. The reason he says that is because back in 85, the big Ellis Island building was completely abandoned. Like it hadn't even become a museum yet at that point. When I was a teenager, I found a video on the internet dating back to the 70s. Somebody had made a film showing the old Ellis Island buildings and their enormous state of decay. Like it was a really horrible, scary looking abandoned place back then. Turns out that it was one of the biggest historic restoration projects ever done. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But anyway, on this picture here on Reading Rainbow, we see Ellis Island there, and there's the World Trade Towers in the background. LeVar explains how, for a lot of immigrants in the old days, Ellis Island used to be the gateway to America. And actually, that shot right there must have been taken a few years before this episode took place, because the next thing we see is LeVar standing on the boat once again, and right behind him, we see Ellis Island all covered in scaffolding. So this is the mid-'80s. That must have been right when they were doing that restoration project. Okay. Yeah, because nowadays you can actually go inside Ellis Island, and they got the old building all cleaned up and turned it into a historical museum. Museum of Immigration, it's called. LeVar says, can you imagine how those immigrants must have felt when they first arrived? Then he turns around and looks over at Ellis Island. The picture zooms into it, and then it dissolves into some black and white movie footage of Ellis Island back when it was up and running. We hear some voices in the background saying, look, it's Ellis Island. We are finally in America. And we see a bunch of people on a boat. All these men wearing hats. I wonder which country they came from. I'm not sure. So it seems like some guy is just providing voices to give you an idea of what these people might have been saying, because this is all black and white silent movie footage. And this guy saying, "There is the Statue of Liberty. Children, it is America. Stand up and wave your flags." Some of them are waving flags and some of them are waving their hats. And the footage is moving pretty fast. It's definitely speeded up footage, the way that one person is holding that baby and, like, moving the baby up and down. Like, if that was in real time, that'd be way too fast. And in the next shot, we see all these heads moving left and right. The guy says, "We get off the boat? What will be next?" Okay, so apparently they're getting off their boat and heading on to the island, Ellis Island. And then we see a kid leaning on some kind of wooden table or box in front of a chain link fence. And I guess he's writing a letter, because the voice in the background is a different voice now. It says, "Dear Mama and Papa, we've just landed. I'm crying. I miss you so much. The great hall is so big, our whole village could fit inside." And we see a picture of the inside of the building with all those big round windows up high near the ceiling. It's kind of a nifty looking place. There's a big American flag hanging in the background there, inside. In fact, they showed this exact same picture in that film from the 70s that I saw when I was a teenager. There's a picture of two kids. The kid on the voiceover says, "I'm lonely, but there are many other children. In a way, I have made new friends." Next we hear a monologue of an older lady. You see some women standing in line there. She says she's standing in long lines waiting to see the doctors. She's daydreaming of what her new life will be like. She says everyone has to be checked to make sure that they don't bring any sicknesses into America. Yeah, they used those pictures too in that older film. The lady says it's hard for the children to be here without their mothers and fathers. And in this picture we see one very shy-looking kid hiding behind a bigger one, and the picture zooms out, revealing many more kids, with that shy one being right in the middle. And we see some people sitting at a table. I guess that's the cafeteria. She says it's her first meal in America. Fresh fruit, warm bread, and... did she say sweet water or sweet butter? Let me listen to that. Sweet butter. So what kind of sweet butter would that be? Is it like apple butter, perhaps? I just googled sweet butter Ellis Island, and this AI thing is saying that some immigrants unfamiliar with American foods mistook ice cream or sweet butter for other items, such as spreading ice cream on bread thinking it was a brand new kind of butter. Okay. So that so-called sweet butter could have been anything. Well, first I typed in just sweet butter, and there was something that said sweet butters are flavored compound butters made by blending softened butter with sweeteners like honey, maple syrup, or powdered sugar, along with fruits, spices, or nuts. So I don't know if that's what she was referring to, or if it was some other kind of sweet thing that this lady mistook for butter. But when I was a little kid, I always thought she said sweet water. I remember thinking, water's not sweet, water tastes like nothing. But the more I thought about it, I thought, well, if I'm really hot and thirsty, water's very refreshing, and so I guess it kind of tastes a little bit sweet in that context, but nope, sweet butter. And I was so busy thinking about that I almost missed this part here, with children walking around outside. And we see one more young woman. They show the picture at 3 different sizes. It's like normal size first, and then they show a bigger version, and then an even bigger version zoomed in way up close to her face. She says, "I have dreams of new life, great hopes. I see America. What waits for me here?" And the last picture we see is people looking off the edge of the boat towards what is apparently New York City. Of course, that was long before the Twin Towers were built. And we don't see the buildings very good because it's kind of like a foggy background, but we do see some boats in the foreground. And then we dissolve back to the, at the time, present day, 1985. And the picture's not rocking anymore, so it looks like LeVar is actually on the island now, like he's on something solid. He might just be sitting on the dock, but it's stable. You see the building all covered in scaffolding there. LeVar says, "For those immigrants, coming to America must have been like landing on a new planet," which is kind of funny because he was correcting the assumption of creatures from outer space. He says that a lot of those immigrants were children who came without their parents. He doesn't mention this specifically, but I did a little research. It turns out that back in the old days, the parents, especially the fathers, had to go to America first and stay there for about 6 years or so before the rest of the family was allowed to go over. So that's how it used to work. And while I'm thinking about it, all that black and white footage, especially the part at the very beginning of that segment where they showed the big building approaching, that reminded me of the old wallpaper that they used to have at Subway restaurants. Like when I was little, it used to be like these green and white pictures, well, sort of like black and white, but with green ink. These pictures of old New York City buildings and all these old Subway maps. They had this wallpaper all over the Subway restaurants with these historical photographs and old Subway maps. Now later on they changed it to like yellow and white in the renovations, so you couldn't really see it quite as good. And of course the Subway restaurants of today don't have that at all. But they had that wallpaper for a long time. So anyway, that brings us to today's featured book. LeVar holds up the book Watch the Stars Come Out, and once again he tells us the title of the book before he describes what it's about. He says, "This book, Watch the Stars Come Out, is the true story of a brother and sister who came here all alone in the black belly of a big ship." And guess what, people? I actually got the book this time. I was very lucky. The library system of Lancaster County, they only had this book at one location. I guess it's a pretty rare book now. But this copy that I have here has the Reading Rainbow book symbol on the bottom right left corner. In fact, in the back of the book, where it has all these reviews and stuff, it says things like book list, children's editor's choice, and American bookseller, pick of the list, parents' choice award, that kind of thing. It also says Reading Rainbow feature selection. So let's take a look in this book and compare it to the show. When the narrator first tells us the title and the author and illustrator, we see the stars in the background kind of glowing one by one. It's kind of interesting because we don't really see those stars on the real cover of the book, except for one at the very top right next to Ricky Levinson. The book was written by Ricky Levinson and it was illustrated by Diane Good. Diane Good illustrated another Reading Rainbow book called, what was that one? It was one of the review books from Animal Cafe, The Dream Eater by Christian Garrison. Diane Good illustrated that one too. In fact, that episode was made right before this, I believe. I wonder if they did those two episodes together because they were both filmed in New York. That could be. And in this episode, the book is narrated by Laura Heyman. I looked up Laura Heyman. I was not able to find anything about her. Like, she doesn't seem to be a well-known actress or anything. So I wonder if they actually hired a kid to do the narration, because that's very much what it sounds like. She sounds like a little kid. And whoever it is, she does an awesome job at this one. She has a really cool voice portraying the main character in first person. Now, I'm looking at the book here, and it looks like Reading Rainbow skips the first page altogether, including the picture that's on it. It says, "Grandma told me that when her mama was a little girl, she had red hair just like me. Grandma's mama loved to go to bed early and watch the stars come out, just like me. Every Friday night, after the dishes were put away, Grandma's mama would come to her room and tell her a special story." Let me turn the page, and this is where it starts on Reading Rainbow. "When I was a little girl, my big brother and I went on a big boat to America." Yep. Oh, and they skipped this sentence. "Mama and Papa and sister were waiting there for us." And so their aunt takes them to the boat and gives them a barrel of dried fruits, and she asks an old lady to watch over them. This is actually a very simple story. There's not a lot of text on every page, so they probably didn't have to cut very much. Because there they are going down the steps into their room on the boats below deck, carrying their bundles down, and the little girl tried to count the steps, but she lost count after a while. And then we see the boat rocking back and forth. They actually have the picture on the screen rocking back and forth at that part. And the kids enjoy the rocking, but some of the grown-ups don't, and they get sick, including the old lady. In fact, she got so sick that she died. And the girl's big brother told her not to worry. He would take care of her. He's 10. Reading Rainbow actually brings up the topic of death a lot more than most of the other shows that I watched growing up. In fact, later this year, we'll get to see an episode about that, Badger's Parting Gifts. And yep, the next page is about the same too. There's the girl in her bunk bed trying to sleep on the boats, but she's sad because she can't see the stars coming out, so there's no windows there. These illustrations are so gorgeous, my goodness. You know, all the characters in the book are beautifully drawn, and that little girl is so pretty too. Here's a sentence they skipped. "Each morning when we got up, Brother put a mark on his stick. I counted them, 23. Then it says, the last morning we looked across the water. I always thought it said the next morning, but no, it's last morning. And they see the two islands, and one of them has a statue on it, laid with a crown. And we all know what that statue is, the Statue of Liberty. LeVar's going to talk more about that later. And everybody's getting excited and waving to the statue. And the boat stopped, and they carry their bundles down the plank. And the girl starts to cry because she doesn't see her parents yet. And Sailor told her not to worry, they would see them soon. And they went on another boat to a place on an island. That's kind of interesting. I thought the boat that they originally came on would go straight to Ellis Island, but maybe not. Maybe they went to the main shore first, and then took another boat to Ellis Island. Then the book says, we carried our bundles into a big, big room. That's another line I skipped. Then it says, brother and I went into a small room with all the other children without mamas and papas. I have a feeling that the kid or the girl who read this read the entire original book, and not just the parts that they wanted to use for the show. Because the way she read this, she actually said, brother and I went to a small room, as if she was actually saying that after they carried their bundles into the big, big room. So in the recording studio, she probably read the whole thing and then they trimmed it down for time. So that's why she put a little extra emphasis on small room, because she had just read the part about big, big room that we didn't get to hear. Okay, and there's the nurse checking her out, making sure she's healthy to come into America. Then brother's gonna get a checkup too. Then the next day they went on a ferry. Land came closer and closer as they watched. Everybody's waving. And that's a very, very old picture of New York City there. In fact, it's so old they don't even have the Empire State Building yet. I believe this story takes place in the late 1800s. Next page. The brother and sister are reuniting with their mama and papa and big sister. Next page, they went on a trolley to their home. Wow, this is an amazing picture here. You see a busy city street. There's all those little shops and restaurants there, and little wagons on the streets selling fruits and hats and things. They even have addresses on these buildings. Let's see. 185, 187, 188. And look, there's even a street sign there. Hester Street. Is that a real street in New York? Let me see. Hester Street is a historic mile-long street in Manhattan's Lower East Side, running from Center to Essex Street. Aha! LeVar's gonna show us Essex Street later. So, it's right in that neighborhood. Let me try the address. Okay, I'm looking at Google Street View here. These buildings do not look exactly like the ones shown in the book, although some of them might have been around back then. Yeah, I don't think this illustration is an exact representation of how this street was, because they've got the building addresses a little bit backwards. From left to right on this picture, it's 185, 187, and then 188. But that can't be right, because usually on a city street, the even numbers are on one side and the odd numbers are on the other. And looking at the Street View thing here, left to right, 189 is before 187. And looking east, 85 and 87 are on the left side. But if there's any connection at all, we could assume that this intersection here in the book is Hester and Mulberry. That would be my guess, because that's the block that 187 is closest to. But either way, it's a really cool picture. We see the trolley car in the background, and then, like I said, all the shops and the signs there. There's one that says cigarettes and cigars, 5 cents. Looks like that's some Jewish restaurants they have. It says Barshan's Wurst, like either a bratwurst or liverwurst or something. And there's some people carrying the stuff that they're selling, all those clothes or blankets or whatever they are. Oh, I just noticed now that this girl's been carrying around a doll on her journey, still holding it now. And so they arrived at their home, and Mama said it was a palace. Mama's palace was on the top floor, and the girl counted the steps as she walked up. 52! Wonder how many floors up that would be. At least 3, I'm sure. Maybe more. Next page, they skipped a whole paragraph here with 3 sentences. Mama and Papa's room was in the middle, our room was in the front, and in the back was the kitchen with a big black stove. And that brings us to the next part they had in Reading Rainbow. Mama warmed a big pile of water on the stove, she poured some into the sink, and helped me climb in to wash. Wow, either that girl is very tiny or that sink is really deep. Yeah, that picture with her in the sink is so cute. So Mama washed her hair, and when it was dry she brushed it. It felt good. Sister gave us cookies and glasses of tea. T-E-A. I would normally pronounce it tea, but on Reading Rainbow they pronounced it tay. It's kind of unusual. I assume that would be iced tea. since they're in glasses and not teacups, it's probably not hot tea. And they skip the line where it says, I was very tired. Next page, she kissed Mama and sister goodnight, and she says, Papa patted me on my head and said I was his little princess. Very sweet. And she went into her room, climbed into sister's bed. It was right next to the window, and she watched the stars come out. 1, 2, 3. On Reading Rainbow, they appear one by one, and then that third star dissolves back to that picture of the Statue of Liberty, and it turns out the light that she sees is actually coming from the statue's torch. And as the light flashes, we see the words, the end, and that's it. Oh, there's one more page here that they missed. It says, this Friday night, I will go to bed very early and watch the stars come out in the sky. I hope Grandma will come to my room and tell me another special story. And then they have the exact same picture that they had in the beginning. Okay, this is interesting. So apparently, this book tells the story that a great-grandmother is sharing with her great-granddaughter, or maybe it's getting passed down through generations. The way they set it up on Reading Rainbow, it sounded like the story was specifically being told by that girl who was coming to America those 100 years ago. And they left out the parts where they were passing it down to, like, the great-granddaughter. I guess they wanted to make it a little bit less confusing on TV, and just have the part with the actual story that was being passed down, and they left out the parts with the younger generation hearing that story. Okay. But yeah, I liked it. That's a very beautiful book. Lovely illustrations. Really cute, very simple story. Excellent choice for Reading Rainbow. I like that. And now we see some actual footage of a helicopter flying around the Statue of Liberty. And we see New York City in the background, with the Twin Towers, of course. And LeVar in the voiceover says, when it comes to welcoming immigrants into America, there is only one star. And here she is, the Statue of Liberty. Wow, very interesting segue. So the end of the book, the little girl was watching the stars come out, and now LeVar's saying that the Statue of Liberty is the main star when it comes to welcoming immigrants to America. Okay. He continues to say that it was one of the first things that immigrants saw when they came in. And then we see the statue completely covered in scaffolding, very much like the scaffolding we saw covering up the Ellis Island building. LeVar says she's being overhauled to prepare for her 100th birthday. I'm looking it up now. It says, the Statue of Liberty's 100th birthday was celebrated with a massive 4-day Liberty Weekend extravaganza from July 3rd through 6th, 1986. When did this episode air? June 26, 1986, so it was right before that. Like the week before. So this was definitely filmed in 85. LeVar said it's taking hundreds of people to get the Statue of Liberty back into shape. And one of those lucky people is his good friend AJ Anello. He says, let's go meet him on the job. I don't know if I pronounced his name right, but definitely AJ. Then we have a cool transition that kind of goes from the top of the screen down to the bottom as this elevator comes down. When I was little at first, I didn't realize that this actually was an elevator. Because when I think of elevators, I think of those things that have the automatic doors that slide sideways, and they have these buttons with the arrows and the numbers and stuff. But here it looks like this big cage that's coming down, and this guy is lifting up all these doors. He says hello to LeVar and shakes his hand, says, you ready to go? Let's do it. And LeVar's wearing a hard hat. So AJ pulls down the doors once again, and it's red with this round symbol painted on the door. It's white with a black arrow pointing up. I don't know if that's actually what it's supposed to be, or if it's some kind of logo for the company that's made the elevator. I'm not sure. When I was a little kid, elevators were one of my absolute favorite things. I liked riding the elevators at the library, at the mall, at the hospital, every place. My favorite parts were the numbers on the buttons. I guess I liked numbers back then. I was a little disappointed that they didn't show the buttons for this elevator. I would have loved to have seen that, but it was still kind of cool to hear LeVar mention an elevator, because then he said, as we rode up the elevator to the statue's base, I could see the repair work was well underway. At first I wasn't sure if he said statue's base or statue space. I guess both would kind of make sense. And LeVar is very amazed by the complicated web of pipes called scaffolding that surrounds Liberty. He explains that it makes it easy for the crew to reach any spot to be fixed. And at the age of 3, I was very amazed by that too. I thought it looked really cool. Looked like a really fun place to explore. And first LeVar looks at the gigantic toes of the Statue of Liberty. He says they're the biggest toes he's ever seen, and he even touches them. Then AJ points out a detail of the statue that some people miss. There's broken chains that represent freedom in the new land. And LeVar asks what's going on up at the top. AJ says that they're working on repairing a bunch of rust spots and skin damage, and they go on up to investigate. Now we see them climbing up the steps on the scaffolding, and this one shot right here looks straight down at this big metal plank that they're walking on, like a big bridge to the next part, and the camera points down so low that we can actually see the cameraman's shoes walking along for a quick second or two. At first I thought those were LeVar's hands, like he's crawling on the thing. He says, "This scaffolding is so huge, is it safe?" AJ says, "Yes, it sways a little, but it's safe." LeVar laughs. I don't know if that made him nervous or not. The main thing that this reminded me of when I was little was the gymnasium at Universal Rocket and Fitness Center in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. The gymnasium was a huge indoor playground with tunnels, slides, ball pits, cargo nets, ropes that you climb, and a big air-filled trampoline. In that great big pipeline structure maze, climbing around in that, I could see a similarity between that and what LeVar's doing here, climbing all this scaffolding on the Statue of Liberty. Like a great big structure that looks kind of like a maze. I remember watching this at the age of 3 and thinking that this looks like so much fun. I want to go there someday. Obviously, that was impossible because it was already long gone by the time I was born. It was only up for like about a year or two. But that gymnasium at Universal was one of my absolute favorite places growing up. In fact, I even wrote about it in my book, Meet Zoe Richards. I gave the gym a different name. I called it the Hickory Health Club, but the gymnasium is exactly identical. Had a lot of fun drawing the illustrations for that book, especially the gymnasium scenes. And they come to a place where there's a great view of Manhattan. AJ says you can see the whole harbor from up there. And he points to the lady's arm, stretched up through the scaffolding. And Liberty's holding the big torch of freedom. And LeVar notices that there's no flame on the torch. And AJ says the flame is being completely rebuilt. And they'll bring the new one upstairs later. In fact, part of the 100th birthday ceremony, they relit that torch. So I guess it used to light up originally, and then it burned out, and they restored it later. Then they dissolved in the next scene. Both LeVar and AJ have to kind of duck under one of the pipes as they walk along to where the statue's face is. And once again, we see the Twin Towers in the background. My goodness, the camera crew had no idea how meaningful that would be to be able to see those buildings all these years later. The first time I watched this, though, they were still around. It was the first half of 2001. And there's LeVar with his hand on the Statue of Liberty's chin. AJ says that not many people get to come up here. I wonder how the Reading Rainbow crew talks these people into letting them do this. LeVar said that AJ Ainala was one of his good friends. Was this somebody that he knew very well and he talked him into it? I don't know. Maybe we'll find out more in the credits towards the end. LeVar asks how high up they are. AJ says, about 300 feet up in the air right now. LeVar laughs. And then LeVar knocks on the chin, and then he says, wait a minute, she's hollow. When I was 3 years old, I didn't know what the word hollow meant. I thought it was a fancy way of saying hello. And the reason I assumed that was because, well, 2 reasons. When you knock on the door, the next thing that usually happens is when they open the door and you say hello. And on Little Bear, when they went to the mountains or to a cave and they were listening to their echoes, they would say, hello, and the echo would come back, hello. And as LeVar's knocking on the statue, there's a little bit of an echo inside, to which LeVar comments that the statue is hollow. But yeah, it wasn't until I was a little bit older that I knew that he meant hollow as in it seems empty inside, not hello. I think in some countries, different languages, hollow actually means hello, like hello. AJ says that the copper skin is wrapped around a steel skeleton. Copper, oh yeah, copper, because originally it wasn't green. It used to be like a copper, like the color of a penny, and then it became green as the years went by. If Watch the Stars Come Out, the book, takes place in the late 1800s, that means the statue would have been brand new. Because the 100th birthday was in 86, 1886 must have been when it was built. There's no way it could have turned completely green by, like, the 1890s, I wouldn't think. Maybe it did, I don't know, because it looked pretty green in the book. Yeah, looks green there. Like, even if it is kind of blending in with the foggy blue sky in the background, they would have made it a lot redder than that if it was copper color. But nope, looks green there in the book. So maybe it was colored copper at first, and then it became green like just a couple years later, and it's been that way ever since. Yeah, I'm looking at this chart here with color comparisons, it looks like the statue is already pre-green after 10 years. So maybe the book takes place in, like, the late 1890s. So yeah, the shiny copper reddish brown color didn't last very long. It was only shiny for like the first couple months, and then it was like a very dull brown for a while, and then it became green. All because of oxidization. Then LeVar asks about a hole in the nose, and AJ says it's from corrosion from the statue being there all those years in the harbor. And LeVar says, from the wind and the rain, like rust on a piece of metal. And AJ says, exactly. It's kind of interesting that the nose would get messed up in the wind and the rain after a while, because when you think about it, the same thing kind of happens to human noses. Like if you spend too much time outside in the wind and the rain, after a while you're probably gonna get a runny nose. Maybe human noses don't get corroded like the statues does, but probably gets a little bit red and scratchy after a while. And LeVar asks how they're going to fix it, and AJ says that they're going to replace pieces of the copper skin like a patch. And he also says that the rivets holding the skin together will be taken out one by one, replaced one by one. And then AJ says that he has to go back downstairs for a while, so he says to LeVar, I'll leave you up here with the lady and I'll be back. And they shake hands and say goodbye, and LeVar just stays right where he is with the camera crew and admires the gigantic face of the Statue of Liberty, enjoying himself standing right close to it. As he stands there, he thinks about the immigrants who saw the statue for the first time and how it represents their hopes for new dreams and a new life here in America. And actually, I think I see the elevator going up in the background. And then LeVar says to us that most immigrants nowadays come to the U.S. by plane, so the statue isn't the first thing that they see. He says, I wonder, what are their first impressions of America? So this is sort of like that kind of segment where LeVar says, how about you? And then he asks the question, but instead of saying, how about you, he says, I wonder. And he's thinking about what these people might have seen when they came in on the plane. And then another picture kind of spins around with a cool whooshing sound, like whoosh, 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 and it falls into place. And we see some people of various ages telling us about their experiences coming to America, kids and adults. Usually when they do a segment like this, they ask kids a question, they answer, but here we have some adults too. I think this first guy might be a teenager. This Asian gentleman with glasses. He says that when he first came, it was November, and he says he's never seen the beautiful autumn leaves before. All those fallen leaves. And then we see a little girl in a fancy dress telling us that when she first came in, she was very little and she'd never seen this place before, and she was very nervous because she didn't know the language for the people. Now, I'm not sure where the first guy was, but this little girl looks like she's standing by a porch somewhere on a city street. Now, this next kid here, it looks like this shot was filmed somewhere on the same block, but it's a different angle, because those railings look a little familiar. Now, when I was 3 years old, for some reason, I thought this was supposed to be like the front porch of a grocery store or something. But no, it's just a city street in New York. I don't know if it was the way the railings looked with that chain there, and seeing all the people walking. I don't know, maybe I saw something in the background that looked like it might have been a shopping cart. I figured this was either the front entrance of John Herr's Village Market in Millersville, or maybe Yoder's Country Market in New Holland. One of those two. But nope, not even close. This was filmed in New York. So anyway, this kid tells us that he came on a plane and it was the middle of the night, and he looked down and he saw the lights shining and the cars looked very small like toys. That's a cool story. Nice perspective there. Okay, now we see a grown woman telling us about how she came from Cuba and she was 4 years old and she wasn't allowed to bring any toys, so her mother bought a doll for her, and she said it was very ugly looking, but she said that at the time it was a very beautiful doll. So I guess what she's trying to say is that it was considered beautiful at the time that she got it when she was 4 years old, but like by the 1980s it would have been, generally speaking, considered ugly. And the reason that she knows that is because she still has the doll at that point. It's kind of cool that she still kept that as an adult, because it meant something to her. Now, I think a lot of these little guest shots are shot at a special ethnic festival that we're going to see in just a minute or two. Because I see all these folding chairs set up outside. And this next kid tells us that one of the things that he likes are the tall buildings, because apparently he didn't have that where he came from. And then a Japanese boy tells us that in Japan, when he was when school was over, everybody had to clean up the room. They had to mop the floor and clean the windows. But here in America, after you finish school, you can just go home. That's kind of interesting because I guess later when I went to public school, that was true. But from preschool through third grade, well, maybe not preschool and kindergarten, but definitely in grades 1 through 3, we were all asked to do certain things to help clean up the classroom. Like, we all had different jobs to do. I forget what my job was. I don't know if it was watering the plants or sweeping up with a broom or what it was. Definitely not vacuuming. I would have remembered that if it was. But yeah, they made us all do different things to clean up the classroom around the end of the day. Because New School Montessori was a private school, so they did things a little bit differently than they did in public school. We might have cleaned windows. I don't think we mopped the floor, though. Yeah, that was the custodian's job. Yeah, because when I went to Manheim Township for grades 4 through 7, they didn't make us do a lot of cleaning stuff at the end of the day, I don't think. They might have told us to put away things that we'd taken out, but not any cleaning projects like this kid's describing. So that makes sense now. Another little girl says that when you come here and you taste the pizza, it's delicious. Oh boy, we're talking about food now. This is gonna get good. And one more person. We have a grown man here telling us that he tasted his first American food when he first came. He says, hot dog. And he laughs as he thinks about it, and he says, I loved it. I don't know if he thought maybe the name of the food was funny, or if he just enjoyed thinking about how good it was when he first tasted it, or what. But whatever the case may be, it's a happy memory for him. And then the picture kind of swooshes away, revealing a very crowded city street all covered with signs. LeVar says, here on Essex Street in Lower Manhattan, many immigrants start their new lives in America. Now let's pause here and take a look at some of these signs, shall we? Essex Camera, Electronics Discount Appliance. What does it say at the bottom? No 220 volts? Don't know what that means. It says here that Essex Camera was at 17 Essex Streets. Let's see what's there. That might be where this piece of video was filmed. There's certainly a lot of fire escapes there. Let's see what some of these other signs say. Winfield Skull Caps. Oh, there we go, 19 Essex Street. What the heck are skull caps? Oh, it's a kind of hat, okay. They're kind of like beanies, or yarmulkes, that Jewish people wear. There's some kind of antique store, cosmetics discounts, some other supply store with electrical and appliances. Israel Wholesale Import Company, bar mitzvah sets and stuff, wedding gifts. Yeah, I'm definitely looking at the right streets here on Google Maps, but I don't think any of those businesses are there anymore. Oh, that's kind of a shame. But it's all across the street from this park. What's this park called? Stewart Park. Or, no, there's no T in there. It's Seward. S-E-W-A-R-D, Seward Park. They don't show the park on Rainy Rainbow, but that's where it is. But yeah, none of those signs are there anymore. Not even that crosswalk sign. I would think that would still be there, but no, it's not. That light post at the end of the road is still there, though. And that building on the left corner, they changed the exterior a little bit, but it has those same 8 windows. Doesn't look near as nice now as it did back then. That one-way sign that you see on the very right of the picture, that's the end of Hester Street right there. Right there where you see the one-way sign. And that no parking sign has been replaced with a more modern one since then. So yeah, it's kind of cool to see the location of where this part was filmed, but all those fancy shops that the immigrants starred are no longer there. So then we dissolve to the next shots, and we see LeVar now walking down a street. We'll try to figure out what street this is in a moment. But he says, the immigrants that came here tried to blend in quickly by putting aside their old ways, but many traditions survived, like the old world recipe for a good old-fashioned sour pickle. Now right behind him we see a sign that says Gus's Pickles, but he doesn't stop there, he stops at a different pickle shop. And actually, he's walking down this exact same block, but it's looking in the other direction. They got all those flags hanging over the street there. They're no longer there. That big building there, on the other side of the road that we see out in the distance, that's still there. Looks like a huge apartment complex. I wonder if we can see what that building's called. That big tower is at the corner of Essex and Broome. B-R-O-O-M-E. Broome Street. Yeah, I believe that building is 66 Essex Street, and it's right across from what is now the Essex Market. That was definitely not around back in the 80s. Well, not in that building anyway. It was in a different building. Used to be a place called the Essex Street Retail Market, which they don't show in the show. But yeah, the current Essex Market is right there at the corner of Essex and Broome Street. But anyway, let's do a little more research on this pickle place that LeVar's looking at here. Okay, LeVar picks up a pickle out of a big plastic barrel. It's a really big pickle. He says, "How much, Lou?" He says, "Well, just help yourself, LeVar." So he's let him have it for free, and that's nice. And LeVar tastes it. He says, now that's a pickle. I like pickles too. I like pickles on burgers and on salads and stuff. I don't think I've ever had a pickle that big before. Okay, now I'm looking at this article from Untapped New York. It says here that Essex Street was dubbed Pickle Alley for the dozens of pickle vendors found there. The New York City pickle scene hit its peak in the late 19th through early 20th centuries when the city experienced a large influx of Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe. Okay, that makes sense because we saw a bunch of Jewish businesses on those signs. These immigrants flocked to the tenements of the Lower East Side, bringing their traditional cuisine with them. Of the foods they introduced to New York, the kosher dill pickle was the most significant. Pickles were cheap for vendors to make and for customers to buy. Late 1800s, you could get a whole cucumber pickle for a penny. Wow. By the 1920s, a pickle would be about 5 cents. The affordable prices made the pickles a favorite grab-and-go street food. At one point, there were estimated to be more than 80 pickle vendors on Essex Street alone, with more than 200 pickle vendors in all of New York City. Now, the pickle shops on Essex Street are no longer there today. However, one store survived called the Pickle Guys. They're at 357 Grand Street. Actually, right at the corner of Essex and Grand. So it's not far from where LeVar is. There still is one shop there. That's cool. If I ever go to New York, maybe I'll pick up a pickle there. So as LeVar enjoys his pickle, he then tells us that today we're very proud of our different heritages. And one of the ways we show it is in special festivals, like the one held at Liberty State Park in New Jersey, where Americans from different backgrounds gather to celebrate and share their cultures. And that brings us to the next scene where we see this Liberty State Park Festival in New Jersey, with lots of people singing and dancing and sharing food and doing all kinds of fun stuff. Alright, before we get into all that, I'm going to take a short break. I'll roll the intermission. When we come back, we'll see what this festival is like. I'll be back in a moment with more. Kids TV and Me is a fan-made podcast, and it is not affiliated with any of the programs, production companies, or networks mentioned on the show. My primary goal of this podcast is to shine the spotlight on some of the lower stimulation alternatives to traditional children's programming, and to help you make smart decisions about your children's screen time. If you are enjoying this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if your podcast provider has a comment section, let me know your thoughts on the topics we've talked about today. To keep the conversation going, you can also leave me a message on Instagram at Joshua Stauffer Creations and on Substack at joshuastauffer1.substack.com, where you can also read my Little Joshua webcomics, my book, Meet Zoe Richards, and coming soon, the sequel, Zoe's Friends. Remember to always pay close attention to what your children are watching, and as always, don't be childish, but stay childlike. And we're back! Now, while you guys were on break, I actually watched this next scene on my VCR with the closed captions turned on, and I took a few notes because there were a bunch of scenes that I had trouble figuring out what the words were supposed to be. So I think I got it down now. So let's get ready to analyze this ethnic festival at Liberty State Park in New Jersey. First of all, is this still an annual event? Do they still do that? Let me see. Okay, it doesn't look like they have the exact same kind of festival that they showed on Reading Rainbow, but Liberty State Park does feature a bunch of community events there. Last year they had a Juneteenth celebration called All About Us Festival. They had the Water and Lantern Festival the year before. They had the Fall Fly Festival, which is a kite show, and a concert series called Summerfest in the City. But yeah, Liberty State Park is along the south side of Jersey City, New Jersey. And from there they've got lots of great views of Manhattan. As a matter of fact, it even has a pedestrian bridge going right to Ellis Island. Speaking of which, I was just looking at this map here. It turns out that they have a little restaurant in the Ellis Island building. If I ever go there, maybe I'll have some fresh fruit, warm bread, and sweet butter. Also, I forgot to mention, it was interesting how in that beginning segment, the lady was talking about being checked by the doctors, that they had to be checked to make sure they didn't bring any sickness into America. And then later on in the book, Watch the Stars Come Out, the little girl was getting her checkup and she didn't quite understand why it was happening. So it was kind of cool that we got to hear the reasoning for that before we got to hear the book story, because by that time we already knew what was going on. After watching it a couple of times, I eventually put the two together. And the festival segment begins with a group of people doing Irish dancing. We hear all this fancy accordion music. Okay, I should look for that building right there. That should give me an idea of what part of the park this was filmed at. It's got all these fancy roofs on it. Let's see here. I wonder if that building's still there. Ooh, yeah, that's gotta be it. Right there. What is that building called? Central Railroad of New Jersey Terminal. Okay, that building used to be a train station, and it's right there by all these ferry docks. Right by the Liberty State Park Ferry Terminal. I wonder if that actually still was a train station when this episode was filmed. Let me do a little research here. Also known as Communipaw Terminal, or Jersey City Terminal. It was built in 1889 and operated until 1967. Okay, so it was already closed by then. The head house was renovated and incorporated into Liberty State Park. It's now on the National Register of Historic Places. It's a New Jersey State Historic Site. I'm reading Wikipedia here. It continues saying that numerous fairs, concerts, and other sponsored events, among them the Central New Jersey Heritage Festival and the All Points West Music and Arts Festival, take place at the station and its grounds. Okay. It's also a popular place to watch 4th of July fireworks. Ferries to the Statue of Liberty, Ellis Island, and Liberty Island depart daily. Definitely add that to the list of places I want to see if I ever get back to New York again. Okay, so with that in mind, I'm going to guess that this festival takes place in this area here known as Terminal Field, because that has a great view of the Manhattan skyline. Or actually, from this view I'm looking at here, the building looks like it's flipped backwards. Maybe it's... Yeah, the festival was on the other side of the terminal. It was right about where the empty Sky Memorial is now. Yeah, this picture right here on the show, with the guy playing the accordion along the left side, and the dancers dancing in the background, that picture would be pretty much impossible to take now because they built that memorial in front of that train station building. So you wouldn't be able to get a good picture of it from that angle. But yeah, that's gotta be where it is. So it's in the empty Sky Memorial area there. Liberty Park, North Field. That's definitely it. And during the Irish music, continuing on now, we see a montage of some other dancers and musicians. There's a group playing the bagpipes. We'll actually hear them later. That looks like a Indian girl in a fancy outfit there. There's somebody stirring a big pot of chili or some kind of soup. I wonder what kind of bread that is. It's either bread or some kind of... Maybe it's cinnamon raisin bread. It looks pretty good. Now that stuff they're frying there, we'll see that a little bit later. It's some kind of pancake patties all made with vegetables rolled together. And that looks like a... How do you pronounce it? Is it gyro or gyro? Gyro. I've had one of those before at York Galleria. They were pretty good. Or maybe it's souvlaki. Greek souvlaki. We'll see that again in a minute. The Irish dancers just finished their dance. And then they interview one of the Irish dancers, and she says that she enjoys coming to the Ethnic Festival because she likes showing people what they do, and they're proud of it. People get to see what Irish dancing is all about. This almost feels like a news interview in a way. Like just the camera pointing to somebody on the street, and they tell us what's going on. Yeah, a lot of these segments of Reading Rainbow that are shot out on the field, especially the ones without LeVar, they're kind of set up almost like a news report almost. And there's that beautiful New York City skyline with the Twin Towers. Again, it's almost like the Twin Towers are in every single shot of Manhattan in this episode. It's almost as if somebody knew that would be important someday. Of course, when I was 3 years old, I never really noticed it. I didn't know anything about the Twin Towers. In fact, most people didn't until after 9/11. But yeah, I definitely notice it now. We see the city back there, and in the foreground, we see a big overview of the festival. And then we hear a guy shouting, "Greek souvlaki! Greek souvlaki! Very nice Greek souvlaki! How many? When I was 3, I had absolutely no idea what he was saying. I thought it was some kind of food called laki, almost like lucky. I thought he was saying, "Get some lucky, get some lucky." Here and now, a piece of lucky. How many? How many? But no, it's Greek souvlaki, Greek souvlaki. I just read that in the closed captions. I finally got it now. I've never had Greek souvlaki before. Should try it sometime. So the guy has these, they look like kebabs almost. There's all this meat on a stick, and he takes one off and wraps it around a slice of pita bread and just pulls the stick out of the meat, and got a little wrap there. Looks pretty good. And throughout this segment, we see lots of people eating food and enjoying the delicious taste and having an awesome time. Next, we see a guy telling us about the food that he has. He says it's not a sausage, but it's a Lithuanian kielbasa. It's not smoked, it's made fresh, he says. We hear a lady off camera saying, made from scratch. When I was 3, I had no idea what that meant either. Like, okay, this food is made of something called scratch. Scratch is, like, the main ingredient. What is scratch? Like, do you scratch up the meat until it looks the way it does in the pan, or what? But nope, made from scratch means it's homemade. I didn't quite catch what was on his shirt. It looks like Craig Gelly's something. Looks like Craig Gelly's Breakfast of Champs. I thought Wheaties was Breakfast of Champions. Not sure what that's supposed to be saying. I also saw a clam truck in the background. Next we got these guys. We see these guys doing stilt dancing, and they're wearing these very elaborate costumes, very bright and colorful. This one guy is wearing all mostly red with some yellow, and they got these masks on with feathers sticking out, and they got like these nets hanging off of their arms, almost like wings. The red parts hanging down from the bottom of the mask, I always thought this was supposed to be like a big red smiley face, like a big happy mouth open wide. But maybe not, because the other guy, wearing mostly yellow with a little bit of red, has a similar thing hanging down from the bottom of his mask, but it looks more like a rectangular bib on his, which would be more like a square yellow mouth, which doesn't make as much sense. There's a guy in the voiceover saying that this stilt dancing art is known as Mokojumbi. Mokojumbi. Mokojambi. Or no, wait a minute. Whoa. I think they typed this up wrong on the closed captions. I just googled it. It's actually Moko space Jumbies. Mokojumbis. Mokojumbis are traditional stilt walking performers in Caribbean culture, particularly popular in Trinidad and Tobago and in the U.S. Virgin Islands, who embody spirits that protect against evil. Okay. When I was little, I thought it was supposed to be walking June beat. Walking like stilt walking, June as in summer, and beat as in the beat of the music. Walking June beat, but no, it's Mokojumbi. And when the guy on the show says that it came from West Africa, I thought he was about to say something Stauffer, because Stauffer is spelled Stauffer, and ST are the last 2 letters of West, and A begins Africa, and Africa also has an F and an R. And when I hear the letters ST, A, F, and R in that order, it makes me think of my last name, Stauffer. But nope, West Africa. That's what he's saying. And then he says that they come from the Virgin Islands. Yep. And as we see these guys dancing, there's one shot right here that looks kind of unusual. The camera angle is looking straight down at this guy's stilt feet. So is this guy trying to hold the camera while he's dancing? Or is somebody just holding the camera very close to him while he's doing it? I don't know. And then he says that he picked his children to do this. So apparently this is their dad talking. And these are his 2 kids doing the dance on stilts. And he says he looks forward to the day when his kids will pass it on to their kids, because the stilt dancing is a special family tradition for them. Now I'm looking here at this last shot of the stilt dance, and the 2 guys kick their big legs way up in the air, and the picture just kind of freezes. And there's the Twin Towers right behind them. They certainly changed a lot along this riverfront here. The railings are different, and also the walking path is different. Back in the 80s, it was just asphalt with a little bit of grass surrounding it, but now it's a brick walkway, and there's a concrete wall along the railings with some little shore railings on top. So Liberty State Park has certainly changed a lot since 85 and 86, but there are a few familiar spots that look pretty much the same, especially that train station building. That's definitely unchanged. And finally, we actually see this guy on camera with his 2 boys. and they have their costumes off now. It's kind of interesting that these two kids that young would be doing stilt walking like that. I wonder how old the kid was on Zoom that was doing all the walking on stilts and riding on the unicycle. He probably wasn't much older than these two boys, I don't think. And so they're sitting there by their car with the interview. And he says that he likes sharing his Caribbean culture with everybody at the Ethnic Festival. And he also enjoys seeing what other people do in their lands. And that brings us to the very loud bagpipe scene. And these guys are sort of doing like a parade, and the guys on front are carrying an American flag. And some other kind of flag too. Which flag is that? That's green, white, and orange. Yeah, that's the Ireland flag. The green, white, and orange. So I guess these bagpipes are also an Irish thing, along with the Irish tap dancing that we saw in the beginning. Okay, now we're going to get some more food here. We see one of the visitors, just some random lady, meets up with this guy and says, "Hi, where'd you get that?" And the guy points to the direction where he found a Puerto Rican meat patty, which I'm guessing might be similar to an empanada. The lady asks if it has peppers and things in it. She thinks it looks pretty good. The guy says, "Yes, it's stuffed with meat, peppers, and tomatoes." I should try one of those sometime. There's a place in Central Market in downtown Lancaster that makes empanadas. Or at least sells them. I don't know if they make them there. And next we see this Korean gentleman showing us how he makes bean sprouts pancakes. That's what he said. "This is a bean sprouts pancake." For years I never had any clue what he was saying, but bean sprout pancake, that's what it is. He says made with a special dough with bean sprouts, scallion, carrots, and onion. When he said bean sprout, I thought he said biscuit. Biscuit, scallion, carrots, and onion, but no, it's bean sprout, scallion, carrots, and onion. Bean sprout, scallion, carrots, and onion. And then they put it in the wok, and they fry them up. Then we see a guy tasting it. He says it reminds him of Rice Krispies, because it's just as crunchy, but it tastes much better. I wish there was a place around here that makes those, because that looks really good. I wonder if it tastes like crispy hash browns or something, with a little bit more of a zing to it. And this guy says, "I'm gonna have another bite." And then they replay that same line 3 more times. "Gonna have another bite, gonna have another bite, gonna have another bite." And they show more and more people trying food. Okay, here's this guy again who showed us the kielbasi, and we can see his shirt now. His shirt says Kugelis, Kugelis, and that's another Lithuanian dish, made of potatoes, bacon, milk, onions, and eggs. I guess that could be a nice breakfast dish. That's why his shirt said breakfast champion or whatever. And he's talking to people about his food. He said, "My children grew up on this, and they make it. And they don't live here. They're out in Wisconsin. We're going to spread out all over the country." And then he laughs. And finally, one more thing in this segment, we see a Spanish singing group. I believe it's called La Tria Latina. And they say it's a type of folklorico music. Like maybe that's Spanish for folk music. Yep, Mexican folk music, that's what it is. And in addition to singers, we also see a guy playing a guitar, a guy banging on a tambourine, and also a little boy shaking maracas. And he even tells us a little bit about his experience playing with this group. He said that his mother used to take him to presentations like that when he was younger, and he learned just by listening to the music, and he would get the beat and plays maracas. That's cool. When the first guy said that we organized a group, for some reason when I was 3, I thought he said organizing roof, because roof and group sound a lot alike. And they concluded by saying, almost every nation in the world expresses their culture through their music, and we as Puerto Ricans do not want to forget that music is part of our heritage and our culture. Now that final shot there looking towards the stage that they're singing on, that's looking north towards downtown Jersey City, but in this picture we don't see any of the skyscrapers that they have there now. Those must not have been built yet. But that's gotta be the direction it's pointing, because we saw a few views coming directly from the stage looking out into the audience, and that angle pointed back towards the train station looking south. So that's gotta be looking north towards Jersey City. But wow, they've really built that city up since then. It's crazy. And then all of a sudden, a very similar computer-animated rainbow appears and then comes towards us and then swooshes up real close into our view. All the colors go by, wiping away that festival scene and revealing LeVar once again. Very similar to how they did on the Milkmakers at the end of the Cheese Factory scene. In fact, this episode has a lot of similarities to the Milkmakers. They both came out the same year. So that makes sense. We had this, like in the Milk Makers, we had the adventure with LeVar going to the dairy farm and seeing all the cows. And here we have LeVar going to New York to see the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island. And then after the book, we have, in Milk Makers, we had LeVar learning how to milk a cow both by hand and with a machine. Then here on Watch the Stars Come Out, we have LeVar's adventure of climbing all the scaffolding on the Statue of Liberty. Now, instead of an animated sketch like we had in Milk Makers, Watch the Stars Come Out, we had that black and white film with people coming into America through Ellis Island back in the old days. And finally, later, we have a similar segment with the cameras taking us to see other things with LeVar just on voiceover, not actually on camera. On Milk Makers, we had the cheese factory, and on Watch the Stars Come Out, we have the Ethnic Festival at Liberty State Park. And both of those two segments end with this very 80s CGI rainbow kind of wiping the picture away, bringing us back to LeVar. Now then, I wonder where LeVar is sitting right there. That's gotta be the Statue of Liberty in the background, way on the distance. Especially the way it's shaped, it's still covered with scaffolding, I think. That's gotta be some kind of dock. Shouldn't be too hard to find the location because we can clearly see that the top of the scaffolding-covered statue kind of angles up left, like the top point is on the left where the lady's arm stretches up. So it's definitely that angle. Let's see if I can find which dock this is. Okay, with the satellite pointing north, it looks like the statue's arm raised up points southwest. So LeVar's location's definitely south somewhere. Yeah, I'm guessing it's either in Brooklyn somewhere or maybe Governor's Island. Might be Governor's Island, let's see. I'm close. I think Ellis Island is directly behind the statue from LeVar's angle. Because, yeah, right between the statue and LeVar's face, I see two little points there, which I assume are the towers of the Ellis Island building. Yeah, this is a tough one. Maybe we'll get a clue when we get closer to the credits. Maybe they'll show us some of the locations. So, anywho, LeVar says that we Americans sure have a lot of different looks, tastes, and traditions that come from all over the world. When he said looks, at first I thought he said books. I mean, he will mention books in a minute, but first he says that many of those traditions came with travelers who sailed by ship, facing all kinds of adventures in their new home. That's when he says, so here are 3 books about some brave adventures. But you don't have to take my word for it. Alright, book review time. What do we got? First we have The Long Way to a New Land by Joan Sandlin, or just Sandin, Joan Sandin. It's an I Can Read history book. Interesting. I Can Read is one of Harper and Row brands, and Harper and Row is the publisher behind both Little Bear and Frog and Toad. They're both I Can Read books. And it looks like this book is very similar to Watch the Stars Come Out. It's a similar storyline. Although the kids don't have to go on the boat by themselves, I think their parents do come along with them. And the reason they go to America is because things are getting pretty rough in Sweden. It's getting hard to live there, so... And this book goes into a lot more detail about how difficult it was to do that long boat ride. And Chantel, the girl who is reviewing this book, seems to have enjoyed it. Next we have The Island of the Skog by Stephen Kellogg. Wow, this kid reviewing this book really sets the mood pretty good. He makes it sound real scary. He says, the Skog, he's ugly, he's terrifying, or is he? Then he introduces himself and the book, and it's about a brave group of mice that got tired of being chased by cats, so they sailed away on an antique ship, and they end up getting lost along the way, and they end up on this place called the Island of the Skog, and apparently the Skog is some kind of big monster that they're afraid of, and I didn't catch this kid's name, but he concludes his review in another really dramatic way. He says, there's a big surprise at the end of this book, and with a very serious look on his face, he says, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. You'll need to check it out at the library and find out for yourself. Good job, kid. That one was really interesting. Great review. And it worked. I did read that book when I was a kid at one point. I forget the details. It was so long ago, but it turns out that the Skog is nowhere near as big or scary as they thought it was. It actually might not have even been a Skog at all. It was something else that was actually more afraid of them. And then the last review book today is called Molly's Pilgrim by Barbara Cohen and illustrated by Michael J. Delaney. It's about a girl named Molly who came to America from Russia. And at first she has trouble getting along with the kids at school because they make fun of her for being different. And then when she brings a pilgrim doll to school, the kids laugh and say, that doesn't look like a pilgrim to me. Because the pilgrim doll doesn't really look like what people would consider a quote-unquote traditional pilgrim like we see on cartoon pictures in Thanksgiving, but it really is a doll made to represent somebody like an immigrant coming to America, especially one very much like Molly, coming from Russia. And this is another book that I did read when I was a kid. Thought it was kind of interesting. So 2 out of the 3 books were also about immigrants coming to America. The only one that wasn't was The Island of the Skog. The Island of the Skog was a little bit more of like a fun little animal story, but still on the topic of going on a traveling adventure trying to get to a better place. So that was an interesting choice among these others. And the girl reviewing Molly's Pilgrim, her name is Monica, and she says, I'm Monica, and I recommend that you read this book because it shows that there are still immigrants coming to America. Let's welcome them. And instead of hearing the little do-do-do, we immediately cut back to the festival once again, and we hear a different kind of music playing. It's the start of a song. Now, we did hear the little music tones in between the other 2 book reviews, the ba-dum-bum, ba-dum-bum, but they skipped the last one because we have something special here. This particular song just so happens to be Coming to America by Neil Diamond, a real 80s song. There's lots of people sitting in the audience there, and they're handing out little American flags. Is that the same festival? It looks like the same park. Maybe it is. Or maybe it's something else, I'm not sure. Oh yeah, definitely the same place. There's that train station again. And they're all standing up and waving their flags. As Neil Diamond sings, everywhere around the world, they come into America. And then we dissolve back to some more archival footage. These black and white shots of historical moments. There's some more people waving American flags. And coming off the boats, coming into America. Oh, this part right here is kind of funny. This guy holding the 2 babies, and he's moving his head up and down, looking back and forth to them really fast. And that one with the guys walking off the boats, that's the same one we saw in the beginning, where the guy was saying, we get off the boat? What will be next? So they're using that one again. This is right where Neil's saying, got a dream they've come to share. They come into America. And then we see these really quick transitions with sort of like a star with a red outline. It goes by so fast you can't really see it unless you pause it. And then it reveals the more current footage once again. There's those Puerto Rican singers again. There's the Irish dancers again. There's the stilt dancers again. And the bagpipes once more. And finally, we flash back to a beautiful sunset picture with the Statue of Liberty in the foreground, dissolving a little closer and closer to the statue as the song concludes. At first I thought this song was made especially for Reading Rainbow, but a few years later when I was about, I think maybe 7 or 8, I heard this song on the radio when we were at Subway restaurant one time eating lunch, which is perfect because, like I mentioned earlier, that wallpaper at Subway made me think of the black and white footage in this episode, and that time I got to hear the entire song for the very first time, Coming to America by Neil Diamond, and so I got to hear the little parts that they left out of Reading Rainbow. What they used on Reading Rainbow was mostly like the second half, like the last minute or so, from everywhere around the world until the very end where it says, they come to America today, today, do 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 today, do 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 do, until it finally slows down, and we see the Statue of Liberty's face up close. Very beautiful. And that brings us to LeVar's final words. He says, welp, our friend Miss Liberty is ready to welcome newcomers again. It's kind of interesting that he said that because I assume all of this was filmed like around the same week, and LeVar still looks exactly the same as he did when he went to see the statue covered in scaffolding. In fact, yeah, there he is again sitting at that same dock with the statue behind him. So I guess maybe he assumed that by the time this episode airs, the restoration project would be finished. Because, like I said, they filmed this in 85 and they aired it in 86. Literally the week before the 100th birthday celebration was happening. So I guess the way the script was written, they assumed that the project would be finished by the time the kids would see this. even though it wasn't finished yet when they were actually filming it. Okay. And then he asks us, but is America still as accepting of immigrants as she always was? He says, I think that's up to you. It all depends on how you look at people or ideas that are unfamiliar to you. And then he says something kind of interesting. He says, just keep in mind that someday the shoe may be on the other foot. Like our ancestors, someday we may be the aliens on our way to other worlds. I wonder who or what will be there to greet us. And with a little chuckle he says, I'll see you next time. So what's LeVar thinking here? Is he thinking that in 100 years we might be going to the moon and we would be the immigrants going to a whole new world? Like, will we be building cities on other planets besides Earth? You never know. I don't think it'll happen in my lifetime, but, I mean, nobody in 2001 knew that the smartphone would take over the world either, so I'm sure the future will have lots of surprises for us. Hopefully they're good surprises. I doubt if we'll be... I mean, something really about it would have to happen if we all have to leave the United States. I mean, I assume we're here to stay. I mean, it is a pretty good country. It's far from perfect, but I'm happy to be an American. But I do like traveling and visiting new places. It's always exciting to see what kind of new things I'll learn there, new things I get to see. And hopefully someday I'll be able to visit New York and see some of these old familiar things that'll sort of be new to me at the same time, seeing them in person for the first time. I did, however, go to New York one time when I was 15, and I didn't actually go to Liberty Island or Ellis Island, but I did ride the Staten Island ferry, and I got to see those things from the ferry boat. So that was kind of fun. Maybe next time I'll get a little closer and maybe walk along those river walks along Liberty State Park. Still don't know what for dock this is. It might not even be there anymore. They might have converted it to a park or something. But I'm pretty sure that wherever this is, LeVar is either sitting on Governor's Island or on a dock in Brooklyn somewhere. I'm pretty sure Staten Island would be a little too far for that shot, because even though the statue is way on the distance, it doesn't look too terribly far. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm not 100% certain if that is the Ellis Island building right next to the statue there. It's even harder to see now, because this shot here is filmed a little bit later at night, I think. I mean, not too much later, but the sky's definitely changing there. A little bit darker. So now, let's enjoy these credits here. And once again, this was recorded in 2001, this particular tape that I have. This was after they changed the theme music. And this is a very long credit roll. It's about... how long is it? It's just under 2 minutes. Like about 1 minute and 45 seconds. That's pretty long for a kid's show credit roll, especially a half-hour show. But that's how it was back in the 80s. It would just very slowly cut from one credit to the next instead of very quickly scrolling up from the bottom to the top. So let's see what we got here. Produced by Cecily Truett and Larry Lancet, the legends behind Reading Rainbow. Directed by Hugh Martin. Written by Peter Barton. We have a few others here. I won't go through all of them, but... okay, hang on a second. I'm looking at this view here. The camera angle changes a little bit when the credits start. Okay, Ellis Island is actually a lot further to the right from the Statue of Liberty than I thought. That completely changes my angle here. And after looking at Google Maps once again, this has got to be Battery Park at the very bottom of Manhattan. That actually makes sense because we saw LeVar walking down Essex Street earlier, so he's no longer, like, on Liberty Island. He's already back in Manhattan. And so, naturally, they would end the show right there at Battery Park. That's where he's sitting there saying his final words and the sun's going down behind the statue. Okay, that's where he is. Battery Park. All right. Okay, music composed by Steve Horlick and Janet Wire at Patchworks. My favorite music in this episode was the boom 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 when they were getting into the elevator. That was really cool. Watch the Stars Come Out, read by Laura Heyman, narration edited by Lee Murphy, photographed by Centron Films, opening animation by Ovation Films Incorporated. Well, it would have been if this were the original broadcast, but they retrofitted the intro with the new animation by Black Logic. Editor James C. Wright. There's that Briggs Bakery again. Okay, now right after the production interns, we have additional music production by Janet Ware and Daniel Schler. Reading Rainbow song, lyrics by Dennis Kleinman, Janet Wire, and vocal by Tina Fabric. America by Neil Diamond. Copyright 1980 Stonebridge Music, courtesy of Capitol Records Incorporated. Yeah, see here when they use a mainstream song, they put it in the credits. I'm surprised Harriet the Spy didn't do that when they put in the Real Nitty Gritty and those other songs that they had. I mean, some of them are original that they made for the show, but they acquired some outside ones too. Well, I guess since Apple TV owns iTunes and they distribute all kinds of music all over the place, they can do whatever they want. They don't have to worry about music copyrights. Historical photos courtesy of American Red Cross, National Archives, Washington, D.C., National Park Service, Local History and Genealogy Division of the New York Public Library, Astor, Lennox, and Tilden Foundation. So that's where they got all those old photographs. Special thanks to Hank Nielsen and the Statue of Liberty Ellis Island Foundation Incorporated, Lair McGovern Incorporated. What's that? Oh, it's the construction company behind the Statue of Liberty's restoration project. Okay, nice. Makes sense that they would put that in. And there's the Pickle Man Incorporated. The Pickle Man, that was where LeVar got his free pickle from. That other sign, Gus's Pickles, that was just in the background. We got more special thanks. Juhan Simonson and the New Jersey Office of Ethnic Affairs. They were probably in charge of that festival. And the School of 41 Nations, New York City. School of 41 Nations, I don't think that's the United Nations International School, unless they changed the name. Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, I can't find anything about that. Whatever it is, it's not around anymore, I don't think. Okay, now we got the copyrights for the books. Watch the Stars came out in 1985, published by E.P. Dutton. Island of the Skog, Dial Books for Young Readers. Long Way to a New Land, Harper and Row. They just show the copyrights for the featured book, not the review books. Molly's Pilgrim, Lothrop, Lee, and Shepherd Books. And of course, LeVar will go over these after the credits are done with the actual book covers on the screen. And as the credits roll, we see some beautiful images of sunsets in the New York harbor, with the water in the foreground and the sun coming down. Executive producers, Twyla Leggett, Tony Bettino. Produced by Lancet Media Productions, Ltd., a production of Great Plains National Television Library and WNED-TV. Copyright MCM LXXXV. Oh, so that's the Roman numeral from 1985. So the copyright's 85, but it aired in 86. Okay. And when they play the music under the credits, it kind of goes back and forth from vocal to instrumental. Like, we pretty much hear all the lyrics of the song with the exception of Butterfly in the Sky, I Can Go Twice as High. But we do hear everything else, eventually. Like, they kind of stretch it out over a course of 2 minutes. And then towards the very end of the credits, we finally hear, take a look, it's in a book, a reading rainbow, just like at the end of the intro. So it was kind of cool. That was the first time I saw an episode of Reading Rainbow that had a credit roll long enough to include the entire song straight to the end at the end of the credits. It seemed really perfect. Because other times the credit rolls a lot shorter, and they just use this same track, but just kind of have it fade out when the credits are done. But here we actually got to hear the entire thing, because it was so long. Nice. Okie dokie, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that was Reading Rainbow, Watch the Stars Come Out. Excellent episode of Reading Rainbow. Definitely one of my top 10 favorites. It was a lot of fun to see LeVar climbing all that scaffolding, covering the statue. Made me think of playing at the indoor playground gymnasium at Universal Athletic Club. And whenever I think of pickles, I always think of Isaac's Restaurant and Deli in Lancaster. And it was fun seeing all those different kinds of foods at the ethnic festival and seeing the guys dancing and playing music. That was really cool as well. I always enjoy an episode of a TV show, especially a live action show that involves food. Always a lot of fun to watch. It's fun to imagine what all that food tastes like. And once again, Watch the Stars Come Out is a lovely book written by Ricky Levinson. In fact, it was her very first book. Very cute story, beautiful illustrations. I'm glad I was able to finally get that book from the library. I don't know how long that copy's going to last since it's the last one in the system, but who knows, maybe one of these days I'll get my own copy. Alright, that was fun. Maybe not quite as thrilling as the shows we did the last 2 weeks, the Frog and Toad and Harriet the Spy that we did in March, the Spring and Dragons and Giants, and then Cross My Heart and Hope Not to Dance. But still, Watch the Stars Come Out is without question one of my all-time favorite episodes of Reading Rainbow. So, if you'll come back next month. I might think of a few other things to say about this episode that I forgot. We'll see. But if you come back next month, we're going to talk about another episode of Reading Rainbow. It's the beginning of May. I'm recording the first episode of April right now. The beginning of May, we're going to talk about My Life with the Wave. That's another classic episode from 1998. It's one of the later ones. Hopefully I'll get that one recorded before I have to leave with my family for a family vacation to Outer Banks. We're going to the beach. In fact, by the time you guys hear that episode, I'll probably be at the beach. That'll be really cool. So, first week of May, we're going to talk about Reading Rainbow, My Life with the Wave. Next month. Next week, it's Kipper time. Next week's Kipper episodes will be The Camping Trip, The Igloo, and Hiccups. Episodes 16, 17, and 18. We'll talk about those fun-filled classics next week. Until we meet again, this is Joshua Stauffer signing out. Hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I'll be back next week with another fun-filled episode of Kids TV and Me. Thanks for listening. I will see you next time.